And after Caribbean, Kazakhstan is the topic. And we have John and his colleagues from Kazakhstan. John, you will introduce yourself. John Velissarios from Otranto, and of course, colleagues directly from Kazakhstan will introduce the programmable money from Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Great to be here. Okay, you have the slides.
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
slides up?
it's you need. Yep, I hope we can list it. Yes, that looks good. Huh?
Okay, good. Thank you. So
Digital Tenge. How you said Tenge?
Tenge,
Even Kazakh.
okay. So I'm very lucky to have both Ruslan and Alexander here directly from Kazakhstan. I was going to do this presentation solo, but here we are with two colleagues from the National Bank of Kazakhstan.
That's perfect. So, thank you very much also for coming on short notice to stage.
Yeah, we just made a decision to split responsibilities on presenting. So John will present, and in case of any questions, we will be able to answer and provide the most recent information on that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruslan. So it's a great sort of story. The Digital Tenge has been a project that's been running for the last 5 years. I'm very fortunate to be able to present this because I've been working on this project together with the National Bank and with the colleagues from the NBK. I'll spare the introduction. You have the slides. You can go through that as well. But this presentation is going to be talking about sort of the current phase of the project and how purpose-bound money, programmability, and so on is being sort of used in the CBDC context. And sort of the projects and the work that has gone on with regards to the Digital Tenge project as well. So what we see in terms of CBDCs, they're actively looking at sort of projects that are looking at public procurement processes around the globe, specifically on how to use programmability, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well, and the idea of purpose-bound money to sort of use it for public spending and how CBDCs can be programmed and enabled in order to be able to do that. Before we do that, I just want to give you a little bit of context with regards to the project itself. It's been running since 2021, and if you were here last year, you would have seen the previous presentation from the project last year. But the project's been running since 2021, and what we have been doing on that project is from 2021 looking at sort of the feasibility of a digital tenge and the main parameters of the CBDC, more of a research project. 2022 focused on the framework for the digital tenge implementation and testing that out. 2023 was the platform was launched in a limited production environment, and the idea was, of course, to put it out there and use it. And there's a few examples of how it was used in retail context as well, and we can talk more about that as well if needed. And then in 2024, it's more about the programmability aspect of it, and so we'll talk more about that in the coming slides. And then 2025 was extending that out, and then this year is sort of looking at the regulatory framework and how to make it more industrial grade, production grade, and scaling that out and putting it into the market. So that's the history of the project. It's been again running for the last 5 years, and it's quite a lot of lessons learned in this project. The project itself. 337 billion digital tenges have been issued in circulation. 62,000 transactions have been conducted. There's six commercial banks that have been part of the Digital Tenge platform, 2 government agencies. We'll talk more about how those are sort of feature in this project as well. Some background about it. We look at this as a third form of digital form of money. At the end of the day, it's a token-based model, 2-tier architecture, like we talked about before in the morning. There's no interest rate on this, so I know the question of interest rate was raised before. There's no interest on this. Remuneration on it, and the regulatory framework is being developed as we speak in order to be able to launch this out into the marketplace. As well as that, there's also been a lot of legislative amendments that have been developed to provide this comprehensive framework for the Digital Tenge, and of course there are things about that around the National Bank being the sole issuer, and the accounts are open, maintained on the platform itself, and so on. So there's a number of things about the regulatory framework. A lot of work has been done, and a lot of work will need to be done in order to complete that. But of course, this is part of the project itself. There's two things I want to mention here, I think, on this slide, and I think this is sort of the crux of the programmability dimension of this. The first one is around payment on event, so encumbrance, encumbering sort of a digital tenge or the CBDC in such a way that if an event occurs, then X many tenges are sent from customer A to customer B. And the reason for this is being sort of critical is because this allows the programmability aspect of it and allows you to do many different things with it. And the other aspect of it that's also important, and we'll cover it in the different use cases, is the marking aspect of it. So not only can you sort of encumber it, but you can also mark the digital tenge in such a way that it says if a recipient meets the following criteria, criteria A, B, C, then money can be sent from A to B, right? So I think those two dimensions of it enable this kind of programmability and enable sort of the purpose-bound sort of usage of CBDC in order to conduct a number of transactions. As you can see on the diagram on the right-hand side there, you have a government agency that's getting sort of instructions from or receiving sort of requests from service recipient and so on, and sending funds to a manufacturer. We'll walk through a couple of examples as well there so you can get a better understanding of how that is used. Of course, you need things like reference data sources and then obviously the processes around that, and we'll talk more about that in the coming slides. There is obviously a reference architecture. The platform architecture is quite complex. I'm not going to walk through that. I think it's a bit too much for this session, but it's in the slides. And this is the Digital Tenge platform architecture with all of the nodes, the banks, and the payment system that is behind that as well. So all the components that you can see here in terms of the architecture, the Digital Tenge architecture. So here, we get into the topic of enabling sort of transparent public spending. And those two encumbrance and topics that we covered before, and the marking topic, are what's used as sort of the building blocks of being able to create sort of the number of the workflows that you see in front of you, where you have a government agency that is giving or sending money to a recipient, to a contractor through a series of steps, in such a way that as you're distributing funds out from a government agency to these contractors, you can encumber the funds and mark the funds, but encumber the funds in such a way that only towards the end contractor gets sort of an unencumbered CBDC. And the steps along the way basically allow you to control how public spending is being conducted, through a series of smart contract portals, the Oracle nodes, and also the steps that you follow here. So a government agency marks and allocates funds in the Digital Tenge platform, as you can see, for a particular project, and the agencies coming from the agency's account. The second step is sort of the contractor signs the contracts with the contracts and the suppliers via the smart contract. A third step is that you see sort of the list of contractors and suppliers, digital accounts and IDs and so on. So you need to have those things in place as well. And the contractor then makes the payments according to what's in the contract from its digital account to the contractors and onto the other bank's nodes. And then finally, you see the final step, the smart contract portal unmarks the funds, part of the money, and then releases them into the final end contractor. So the whole idea behind this is to enable sort of the public spending to be done in a much more efficient, transparent process. When you have examples of big bridges being built and half the funds disappear along the way, here you have a full transparency from the government agency all the way through to the end contractor, and then finally when it reaches the end, the builder on site, those funds are unencumbered and they become just CBDC that they can then use to either deposit or spend separately. Again, using the same formula of encumbrance and marking. Here we have a different example of how you can buy sort of farm animals, right? So in this example, it's very specific. But here you have basically a farmer that's selling, a farmer that is borrowing and buying sort of a cattle, and you have a database that allows you to sort of track this. And of course, you also have this social enterprise corporation that is in the middle of that transaction, that is enabling this kind of transaction to take place, funding and lending sort of to one of the farmers and so on. And only when the database is updated are the funds released. And so here you have a very interesting flow because you're lending money, and only when the transaction is completed, in other words, the cattle is registered in the database to the new farmer, then the funds get released in terms of lending that out. So I think here you also, this can be generalized to a number of different things as well. In terms of this example, can be, you can do a lot of different, there's a lot of different scenarios that you can see in this kind of an environment. And the idea here is, of course, that you can encumber the funds until the time where you actually realize the actual transfer of an asset. Here, in this case, it's cattle. I've seen examples of this kind of stuff before, actually, with driver vehicle licensing as well. So when you transfer a vehicle, you can sort of encumber the funds, lock the funds, transfer the registration of the vehicle to a new owner, and then you can pay them, directly through that. So it creates a very interesting sort of dynamic with regards to using sort of programmability and so on. Again, similar thing, but this time there's a time dimension to it. So here, because of the fact now you can, you have this 180 days in the middle of that, sort of same idea, but here what we're doing is we're adding a time dimension, when the time dimension here is if the contract, if it's done within a certain period of time, then of course the transfer completes and the funds are released. And if it's not done in that time, then the funds go back. So you can lock funds and do some interesting things with timing and encumbrance and marking and so on. And then one of the great examples, and I think this is one where we've seen a lot of different, a lot of interest, actually. This is in Kazakhstan. A lot of interest regarding this one is around the VAT returns. And as you know, sort of, I think if you're dealing in the corporate world, you have to pay VAT, and then in reality only the final sort of final good or the final service that is purchased by an individual, by an individual or company gets to pay the VAT. But along the way, everybody in the supply chain, everybody in the chain, sort of has to file and get and redeem and pay and then file for VAT returns and so on. Very inefficient process. And here, what we've done with this with the VAT return is basically allow you to mark certain funds that have been paid, the VAT has been paid, and only towards the end do the funds get released to the state revenue office, basically. And along the way, the process is made much more efficient for all the parties involved in the transaction. And I think the take-up of this has been very positive, right, in the marketplace, because everybody sees the value in this, and this alone gives a justification for implementing something like this kind of a process. So I won't walk through the steps. I know that I'm conscious of the time, but here we see a lot of applications of that. Scenarios realized, again, here are the number of the scenarios. There's a number of participants in those. Those are the kind of things that have been, we can implement this purpose-bound money and programmability. And I think this is great because, you can add probably another 100 of these to the list and so on, which I'm sure they are. And finally, next step.
Yes.
Next. So,
John,
yeah.
I would suggest that we have a representative from Kazakhstan here. I would start with question.
Yeah.
Maybe is there some question from the auditorium? Do we have some question? It's the afternoon session, but I would love to allow some. I would have the question: how is the experience? How is your experience? You're from the Central Bank of.
Yeah, we are from subsidiary organization of the National Bank of Kazakhstan, which is responsible for actually implementing Digital Tenge project. And
how is the experience? How would you see this being implemented in a larger scale?
Well, actually, that's something quite difficult to explain, because I remember the very first meetings with the stakeholders, with commercial banks, and well, firstly, nobody understands actually what is CBDC. There were a lot of questions like, why would you do that? Do you understand how exactly it's going to work? And of course, there was a lot of pushing back. Like, people didn't understand. Legal entities thought that it's all about control. It's nothing about being commercialized or simplifying the process. And now, like after 5 years, we are finally really glad to see that there are some feedback from the market, and this is kind of positive feedback. They want to participate in the projects because they finally see the value in using Digital Tenge, in using CBDC, in using programmability. It simplifies their processes. It allows for better competition due to transparency and efficiency of use of government funds. Of course, we would like actually to have it not in like 5 years, but maybe a little bit sooner. But you know, you get what you do, you get what you work for, and we are glad that we finally see Digital Tenge becoming a reality.
Thank you very much. Also, John, thank you very much for the presentation. Any more questions? Yes, there is at the very back. I'm running. Yes, we need for the. Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much also to the two colleagues for coming all the way here. I was wondering, also looking maybe at China and the international approach that China does with their CBDC, which has recently changed. Does maybe from the Kazakh point of view, you guys intend to also cooperate with the Bank of International Settlements to maybe foster also the role of your national currency in that respect, to have some kind of, I don't know, participation in the M-Bridge project or other things, other, you know, examples
we
like
actually,
that?
we're actually participating as a state and observing state in the bridge project. For now, we can see that due to what's called quite abrupt change of management in BI and the bridge project, there is still some kind of turmoil. Maybe not turmoil, but there is still figuring out what to do with the platform. Of course, we are open for any kind of cross-border collaboration. We also had a lot of conversations with different central banks from different regions. But of course, it depends on use cases and methodology, and of course regulation, because it's kind of easy to implement a technological platform, but it's really difficult and painful when we go to methodology, to regulation. And that would require some time to actually to solve those issues.
Thank you very much, John, and also representatives from the Central Bank of Kazakhstan.